is the 305th day of the continued oppression, deliberate acts of terrorizing, inhuman lockdown, and military siege faced by the innocent people in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In recent acts of state terrorism, Indian occupation forces martyred 21 Kashmiris, including the extrajudicial killing of 13 innocent Kashmiris in a single day. In the month of May alone, at least 200 people have been injured due to the use of brute force by the Indian occupation forces. Pakistan remains deeply concerned over unabated extrajudicial killings of the Kashmiri youth in fake encounters and the so-called anti-infiltration operations. While the international community is preoccupied with fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, India is busy intensifying its brutalization of the Kashmiri people. Today, on the International Day of Innocent Children, Victims of Aggression, we draw the world's attention to the children of the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, who have been living in the midst of a brutal and repressive Indian regime for more than 7 decades. The children of occupied Kashmir have been the direct target of violence and aggression as a means to control, silence, and punish any dissent from their families and the local communities. Abduction and molestation of young boys and girls during midnight raids and the cordon and search operations is the preferred punitive tool of the Indian occupation forces. Aggression against children has reached an unprecedented height, especially after the abrogation of the disputed territories' special status on 5th August 2019. According to reports of independent voices within India, around 13,000 boys were abducted after 5th August 2019, some as young as 14 years of age. These children were kept far away from their families in jails in Agra, Delhi, and in Tihar. In addition to abduction of minor children, pellet guns have been fired against children as young as the 20-month-old Hiba, the youngest pellet gun victim in the world, that has rendered these children partially or completely blind. The psychological trauma resulting from such brutalities committed against these vulnerable children will have lasting effect on their lives and will compromise the full development of their personalities. The world needs to wake up to the reality of India's brutalization of innocent children in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. These are not allegations, but well-documented incidents reported by legitimate and internationally recognized human rights and civil society organizations. The international community must come forward to protect the vulnerable children of the occupied Jammu and Kashmir and press upon India to ensure their protection and safeguard their fundamental rights. In recent days, the Vice President of the European Parliament, along with 14 members of the European Parliament, have addressed a joint letter to the President of the European Commission and the High Representative of the European Commission on the grim human rights situation in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Significantly, these 14 members of the European Parliament represent different political groups within the EU Parliament. In their letter, the MEPs have raised important points, including Kashmir has become one of the world's most militarized zones and a tremendously dangerous conflict flashpoint. The freedom and fundamental rights of the people of Jammu and Kashmir have been suppressed for the past 7 decades. India has imposed a de facto 9-month-long military lockdown and imposed a stifling curfew, shut down telecommunications and internet, and arrested political leaders. The European members of Parliament have called for a stop to exploiting and fomenting ethnic and religious tensions and to give Kashmiri people the hope and a chance at self-determination. In their letter, the European members of Parliament have called on the President and the Vice President of the European Commission to call upon India to fulfill its international legal obligations. In another development, the chair of the European Parliament Subcommittee on Human Rights, in her letter to the Home Minister of India, has conveyed concerns over arrests and harassment of human rights defenders in India, the use of terrorism charges to silence dissent, the weakening of the judicial oversight in India, the condition of prisoners amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The letter also calls on the Government of India to ensure a safe and conducive environment for civil society and to consider enacting a law on the protection and promotion of human rights defenders. These recent actions by the European Parliament show a growing concern with the policies of the RSS-inspired BJP government, particularly with regard to the deteriorating human rights situation in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir and the need for the international community to take urgent steps to address it. Separately, as part of the continued diplomatic outreach, Prime Minister Imran Khan held a telephonic conversation with his Italian counterpart, where the COVID-19 pandemic and a broad range of other subjects were discussed. The Prime Minister shared his deep concern over the continuing double lockdown, as well as the intensification of the military crackdown by Indian occupation forces in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The Foreign Minister, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, also held telephone conversation with his Dutch counterpart, as well as a video conference with the Minister of International Development of Canada. Matters of mutual interest, including the pandemic and other issues, came under discussion. Pakistan has been closely monitoring the situation along the China-India border areas. We hope that the issue will be resolved in line with the agreed understandings and established mechanisms to maintain peace and stability in the region. We hope that under the impulse of BJP's rightist ideology, peace and security in the region will not be further imperiled. Pakistan also completely rejects the baseless allegations by India regarding the Buddhist cultural heritage sites in Gilgit-Baltistan. The Indian allegations are contrary to historical facts, international law, and the relevant UN Security Council resolutions. The Indian government's contentions concerning the Buddhist cultural heritage in Gilgit-Baltistan are preposterous. These are part of Indian leadership's unrelenting anti-Pakistan propaganda. With its own tarnished human rights record in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and the abdication of responsibility to protect its own minorities from Hindu extremists, the RSS-BJP government has no credentials whatsoever to even feign concern for minorities, either at home or elsewhere. India's state terrorism and extrajudicial killings, in fake encounters in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the vandalization and destruction of minorities' places of worship, including the historic Babri Mosque, lynchings by cow vigilantes under the government's watch, the Gujarat massacre of 2002, and the targeted killings of the Muslim communities in Delhi in February 2020. The rendering of millions of people stateless with the discriminatory steps such as NRC are well documented by international human rights and humanitarian organizations. It is time for Indian leadership to do some serious introspection and to take requisite steps to safeguard and protect the lives, rights, and places of worship of minorities in India.